The disease process goes like this. There is a conflict. Whatever that conflict is, that's the first phase of the disease process. That's an emotional disturbance of some sort, whatever that emotional disturbance is. This is one that is big enough to where the brain says, we got to stop dealing with this. It's too big. I'm too distracted. I have to download this into the body. And so then the emotional conflict becomes something biological.
Welcome to the How I Healed It podcast. Here at How I Healed It, we get to hear stories from those who have healed their bodies from the unhealable through alternative methods and the experts who are passionate about whole body health and healing. As I have been on my own healing journey, I have found that the number one thing that has kept me going is learning from others who have gone before me. I believe we can gain nuggets of wisdom from each healing story that we hear. Thanks in advance for subscribing to our podcast so we can continue to bring these amazing stories. I'm your host, Plantfully Megan. Let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Megan and welcome to the How I Healed It podcast. Today, I have the honor of chatting with Craig. Craig is a professional pastor and a coach. He is also a stage 3 lymphoma survivor and is confident that the spiritual and emotional work he has done has contributed to his healing. He now works with clients to guide them through the same process that was so transformational for him. And I'm so excited to get to chat. Craig is someone that I've worked with on my healing journey, and I just feel like the insight that you have into the emotional and spiritual side of things has helped crack things open so much for me on my healing journey. I think it was really hard for me to access. And so I'm really excited to get to do this chat with you today because I think it for a lot of people on their healing journey is a huge thing. And thanks so much for being on.
You bet. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. My story is not really a straight line. My healing journey took some twists and turns, which now that I'm past it, I'm grateful for. I wasn't necessarily grateful in the moment, but my mother had lymphoma. So I had lymphoma. My mother had lymphoma all through my growing up years. She was diagnosed when I was 5, and she passed away from lymphoma when I was 17. So like all my formative years were seen kind of through the lens of her having to go to the hospital all the time. I actually learned to drive. One of the ways I learned to drive when I was 15 was taking her to Seattle for blood transfusions.
Wow.
And so, so my, like all those memories are mixed in with this, to this backdrop of like her having cancer and going to the hospital to do stuff. And so when I was diagnosed, I definitely didn't want to do it the same way.
Yeah.
Because she fought for years and years and years, and the treatments made her sick all the time, and then she died. And so I was like, we're trying something else. Like,
right.
And so my wife is on board. We're both pretty like naturally minded, health conscious type people. And so when I told her that, she was all about it, and she set to work researching. I mean, I don't know if she actually caught every clinic in the whole world, but we were looking at things from Australia to Europe to Northern Africa, Cyprus, the island of Cyprus.
Wow.
I mean, everywhere that there was a cancer clinic, she was talking to them on the phone. So we landed on Hope for Cancer in Mexico. And because we felt like everything that everybody else was doing, Hope for Cancer had a piece. They had a kind of a piece of all the pies that were out there. And so we liked the fact that was something that kind of had all the pieces to the puzzle. And so we went to Hope for Cancer, and it was a great experience. And I was there for 3 weeks and learned a ton. Got exposed to the work which I now do, which is amazing. And that's the emotional and spiritual aspect of healing from cancer, healing from disease in general, and understanding the emotional backgrounds behind things. This just was my exposure to it. And so after 3 weeks of treatment there, doing all the things, all different types of treatment. It took 8 hours every day,
Wow.
and things were looking really good. And I went home and I kept going on like everything that I could possibly do at home. We bought saunas and we were doing foot baths, and I was getting vitamin C infusions, and doing all kinds of supplementation, and everything imaginable that I could do.
Mm.
And we thought that we had beaten it. We got to the point where I was so healthy, and what I was doing was taking a lot of my day. So I still wasn't working, unfortunately, but I was so healthy and I felt so good that we actually thought it was over. We thought we beat this thing,
Wow.
and we did it all naturally, and wahoo for that. And then I'm pointing to my shoulder because it was an intramuscular injection that I was on every day. It was an immunotherapy that was not FDA approved. And so I couldn't get it in the United States. I actually had to go to Mexico to get it. I had to travel to Mexico and pick it up. And it took us some time. And so I had run out of that particular thing. And in the 2 weeks that I didn't have it, I went from thinking I probably won, we probably beat it, like we probably did this the right way, to, oh my gosh, what if I don't make it?
Wow.
It was
that fast.
It was that fast. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
It was, and it was a shock too. I mean, beyond just being scary, going from, I think I'm done, I think we beat cancer, to, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
That was a really abrupt shift.
Yeah.
I went from feeling healthy and going on a mountain bike ride every day to not being able to join my family for Christmas
Wow.
in just a really short amount of time, and not being able to.
How long after you were at Hope for Cancer were you feeling that optimistic, and
Yeah,
then it shifted?
it was about so I did the 3-week treatment at the clinic in Mexico, and then I did at-home stuff for about 6 to 7 months.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I ran it, like I said, I ran out of that, and it's my fault. I just didn't plan ahead. I also felt like I was done.
Yeah. I was going to ask if that was a
Like,
contributing factor.
yeah, I was like, I beat this thing, so
Yeah.
like, why would I hurry down there to get this medicine?
I'm
Um,
good.
I'm good, yeah. And so that was a factor too. But things went so bad so fast that the doc, I called down there and I was like, we got to do something right now.
Yeah.
And so we basically, the doctors down there said, it's time for chemo. You need chemo.
Okay.
And just, this is my 2 cents on healing, right?
Yeah.
We have lots of tools.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are morally wrong.
Right. Yes.
Right. And so then, that's an integrative approach as opposed to a holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
And holistic has kind of, for people who hold that viewpoint, holistic has become moral.
Right.
And like Western medicine, or allopathic medicine, for people that call it that has become immoral.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a moral choice.
I agree. I agree. I love that you said that, because I think that's kind of the line that I want to straddle even on this podcast, is the fact that there are all these incredible natural remedies that sometimes are ignored, because it's like there's two sides of the coin, and people get so almost religious about which side of the coin
Yep.
they're on. But I think that there's more gray area than we want to believe sometimes. And
Totally.
you're right that it does become almost this moral choice. And so I think following your intuition and just doing what you need to save your life, rather than being so stubborn in one path or another, is super important. So I love that you brought that up.
I was actually talking with some friends of ours whose mother is struggling with breast cancer and went to Hope for Cancer, because they're suggesting to her that she have chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, they're suggesting what they think is going to be a life-saving treatment.
Yeah.
They're not making a moral distinction between one or the other. And so I felt, and that was part of my struggle. And the reason that I'm thankful for the twists and turns, like I said at the beginning, is that if I had just beaten it with all this natural stuff, I probably would have held like the moral stance. This is right, and chemo is wrong.
For sure.
And I'm so thankful that that's not my experience, because I don't believe chemo is wrong. I think that chemo is like nuclear war.
Mhm.
You know, you don't rush into a skirmish with a nuclear bomb. You rush into it with like some appropriate weapon for that
Right.
scenario, right? And I think if we, I don't like to necessarily talk about fighting cancer as a battle either, because I don't necessarily think it is, um, but it's helpful in thinking about it, right? Like, we don't use huge weapons for small battles. We use
Yeah.
small weapons for small battles.
Yeah.
Um, we only use the big stuff when the collateral damage is worth it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the problem with chemo is that it causes a lot of other damage.
Yeah.
And so we avoid it until the other damage is worth it, right?
Yeah.
So if
That's
you're going
so
to
good.
die, it's worth it to have a little other damage to your body to live.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's when we use chemo. So
So
anyway,
good.
my
And
two
that
cents.
I love that too, because I think there's two different ways people go about their healing journeys. And one is they'll start off with conventional treatments. And sometimes, like for me in my endometriosis journey, none of them have worked. I've come to the
Mm-hmm.
end of what the medical community is able to offer me. And so then all of a sudden it's, all guns blazing towards natural methods instead. And yours is almost the opposite, where it's like you started out with the natural
Yeah.
way of healing and then had to turn to more conventional treatments to be a part of your journey. And so I love that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but I mean, the really life transforming part for me has been in walking through all of that. Um, the reasons that I was sick were exposed to me, and that has been the part that I've clung to as like the key to becoming well. And I mean well, like in the broader sense, like I'm actually better now after cancer, right? I'm a
Right.
more complete person. Um, that's not true for everybody, honestly. Some people go through a cancer journey or a really hard health journey and they survive, but they're actually just not better on the other side. They're more bitter, and the suffering didn't cause them to grow. It was a wound that is yet unhealed. And so I think that for me, the thing that I'm blessed by is that now on the other side, I have a little more understanding of my life and who I am, and what my gifts are, what I should be doing with my time on this planet, and so that's been the best thing. And so when like I'm actually thankful that I had cancer, not
Yeah.
because I'm like a sick person that likes to suffer, but because what I learned through the process has changed my life and given me the ability to help others in a way that's meaningful. So, yeah,
That's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome. So then you started your chemotherapy journey at that point where you were basically facing death. And
yeah,
what happened from that point?
yeah. Um, so my doctors in Mexico had said, if you can find someone to give you like a smaller dose, that would probably be better. We don't think you're going to need a whole dose.
Okay.
And I couldn't find anybody willing to do that. That doesn't fit the protocol. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to try and stop when I think I need to stop.
Yeah.
And so I started taking chemo, and the first, my wife and I have arguments about how many treatments I went through.
Okay.
Her numbers are probably more reliable than mine, but anyway, I went through it for several months. And for several months, it was the experience was going in, and then during the infusion, it would feel kind of like kind of like tingling on the inside, like your body, like your feet are falling asleep, that tingly feeling,
Hmm.
kind of like that on the inside, is sort of what it felt like. And at a certain point, though, we went in and it started to burn. Like it was changing. The sensation of like having those drugs in my system was changing dramatically. And it was literally, it felt like my insides were on fire.
Whoa.
And I said to Jen, I don't think it has cancer to attack anymore. And I don't know. I'm not saying this
Wow. Right.
from a medical background. I'm saying this because this was my experience and this is what I felt.
Hmm.
So I said, I don't think I have cancer. I think I'm done with chemo. And so we went to a doctor and asked for a PET scan,
Mm.
and he said, no, you need to finish your treatment.
Wow.
And so we had to fire him.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, here's the other thing that I think maybe I can offer people on a healing journey. Doctors are not God. Not all of them disagree. And they are only a tool for you to get the treatment that you think is going to best help you heal. And insofar as they are not doing what you're asking them to do, they have wisdom that needs to be listened to. But if they are not listening to you, then maybe you need a different doctor.
Really, really
Because they
good.
really are just, if you think of them as a tool to get what you need to heal, then it's not quite so personal, and they don't have nearly as much power that way.
Mm.
So we ended up, and that was hard for me to come by. Part of my emotional healing journey was being able to speak up for myself and actually say what I want, as opposed to what other people are trying to impose on me. And
Yeah.
so, telling my doctor that I wasn't going to work with him anymore was extremely difficult for me. But I think that was one of the things that began like the healing process for me, or like helped me along the way, or maybe was evidence that I was on a healing journey.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went through one doctor to the next one, and he said, I'll treat you like an adult. He actually said that out loud.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, totally.
That is
No,
awesome.
not
Because
making it up.
I have had that experience with doctors too. I've had some incredible doctors that I've worked with who are just so in your corner and they're listening and they want to know what you're intuitively picking up on. And then I've had other doctors where they treat you, they almost patronize you and treat you
Totally.
like a child, and you just feel so small. And those are not the doctors to work with.
Not
At
at all.
least in my experience, I can't do that anymore.
No, not at all. So yeah, so he said he would treat me like an adult, and he gave me a PET scan, and there was no cancer.
Wow.
And so then you can't trust the PET scan necessarily, because PET scan doesn't pick up cells that aren't quite cancer yet.
Right.
Which is why in chemo treatments, they kind of know that happens. Like they give you chemo way past when there's no cancer observable in your system, because they want to catch the stuff that's lingering. So there is rhyme and reason to it.
Yeah.
But so I went back to Mexico then and started doing a lot of detoxification work, and they have some tests in Mexico that are not FDA approved. It was this one test for what they call circulating tumor cells, which are essentially damaged stem cells that haven't yet become cancer.
Oh.
And it was designed in it's amazing. It's designed in Germany. They put a like an activator in your system that uses kelp, which is photosensitive,
Uh-huh.
and then it'll attach to those cells, and then they put a laser on your vein, and as the cells that are attached to that kelp go past, the laser can count and read how many go past that have that activator stuck to them.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And then if it's a positive test and there are some that are circulating in there, they put a stronger laser on, and the next time they come by, the laser activates the photosensitivity of that activator and can move toward killing the cell.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
it's a treatment too. But anyway, mine was negative, so there wasn't anything floating around.
Wow. That's awesome. So you went
Yeah.
back down there, did detox to kind of detox even of the chemotherapy and everything, and then just
Yep,
confirm that you're cancer free.
exactly.
And that was at the end of your cancer journey at that point?
That was kind of the end. That was I went home And I actually, I mean, this kind of just part of the story. I started planning to go back to work while I was in Mexico still, like doing all of this, because
Mhm.
as soon as the test was negative, I was like, I'm done going
Yes.
back to work. Um, in retrospect, I think I would have tried to wait a month.
Yeah. Have a little, take a little breather.
Yeah, because I went home and immediately went back to work, and then about 3 weeks later, I had my port out because I still had a port in, um, and and then that's been the end. So then I've gone back, for checkups and things, but they've all been negative or positive, whichever way you want to say it. No cancer
Yeah.
present
Yeah.
since then. So yeah, that ultimately is the end of the treatment portion of the journey.
Right.
I think
So,
maybe. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think maybe one of the major shocks for me though was how emotionally complicated it is to get better.
Yeah.
And I was not ready for that at all. I thought it was going to be like this jubilant, here we're,
Oh,
well, and my wife and I both, we walked out of that appointment where I had the surgery to get that port out, and we looked at each other and we were like, what the hell do we do? What the hell do we do now? Like,
for real.
now we survived, and now I'm just gonna like go back to life the way it was before.
Wow.
And ultimately I couldn't do it.
No.
So couldn't go back to life the way it was before.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is that my brain had changed. I mean, there's a nickname, chemo brain. I
Mm.
had a really, really hard time at work for like 6 months because of
Yeah.
my, like, I could not get my brain to do what it formerly needed to do. So
Totally.
my
Not to
old my
mention all the emotional trauma that you just experienced when your
Sure,
life takes a hard turn like that. I mean, that's a whole thing to process, like
totally.
everything that you went through. Like, I don't know that you can be the same after that. What I have found in my personal journey of trauma, not to mention or downplay any of the chemo effects that I have no idea what it's like to experience something like that. But just the trauma element of exiting out of a very traumatic experience, it's just gonna, my opinion is that it's just gonna change you. At least that's what I
Hmm.
found for me. I think at the beginning of our infertility or prolonged fertility journey, at the beginning of that journey, I was just so determined that it's gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine. And I like held on to that. Like, it's fine. It's just a little delayed. It's okay. It's okay until about the 4 year mark. And
Hmm.
then I just remember looking at my husband and saying, there's no going back now. This now
Hmm.
has changed me. Like,
Yeah,
I can't get back what I I've gone through at this point with all the surgeries and all the things, and just infertility itself is just a hard walk, a much harder walk than I thought it would be to
totally.
go on. But these things, they change you. These life these journeys that we didn't expect to go on, they
Yeah,
really do change you forever. And for me, that was the case. And it sounds like that was the case for you as well.
yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
I would love to circle back to, I know the first time that you went, I think it was the first time you've shared this with me before, that you went to Hope for Cancer and then they did emotional work with you. That was that kind of the spark of what got you into this work that you do now? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely was. I was blown away because I walked into my first, like, I didn't know counseling was a part of it, first of all. I was kind of
Yeah.
blindsided. I was ready for like colonics and
Right.
saunas and IV therapies and all that stuff. But when they sent me to a counselor, I was like, "What? I'm fine."
Come on. This should come with a warning
Have you
label.
talked to me? I laugh about this stuff. I was like, "No, I'm fine." And but I went in there, and it took her about 5 minutes to ask me like life-changing questions. And the reason she could do that is that, she was observing what my disease was doing.
Mm.
And because she could see what the disease in my body was doing, she knew what questions to ask me. And I was absolutely floored that that was possible. Um, I didn't have, I grew up in a very conservative, um, Christian um, house where we had a major medical problem, right? That's my background, right? And so everything was rational. And so anything that seemed even slightly, you know, out there was ultimately rejected immediately
Yeah.
because of our what we felt like was our spiritual understanding. And so um, but I couldn't deny it. Like she immediately pinpointed exactly the major issue in my life, and so I came out of that, and I like at that moment I was like, I have to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah.
I have to be able to um, look at people and I'm a pretty intuitive person anyway, but I was like, I have to study that. I have to know how to look at someone's disease or know what's going on in someone's life physically, and then connect that to what's happening for them emotionally. Like it was,
Yeah.
there was a fascination, but it was also, I mean, it sparked, one of the most significant emotional shifts in my life because, um, it had implications. I basically my disease was in my neck,
Mm-hmm.
and so her question was, "What is it that you never confronted? What is it that you've never said? What is it that you are unwilling to speak about because it's killing you?" And
Wow.
then, the kicker for the next one was that this is also generational work.
Yeah.
And she said the next part was, because if you let it kill you, then your son will have to deal with it.
Whoa.
And I was like, whoa, okay. Like that was kind of the gauntlet that was thrown down. Okay, now I have something to change. I have to learn how to speak up for myself. I have to learn how to, first of all, I had to learn how to know what I actually believed and wanted. And then I had to learn how to stand up for myself in a significant way so that I could express that um, in a way that could actually defend what I believed.
Yeah.
And and that that's what changed everything. It also opened my eyes to the fact that I'd never expressed any anger,
Mm-hmm.
never expressed any sadness really. And so it had huge implications for my marriage and my life. And
Yeah.
Jennifer and I, my wife and I, we joke about the my like cancer time in Mexico as like a really weird marriage vacation. because because it sucked and I was gone all the time, but it exposed, we really, she grew up with parents that argued a lot. They love each other and they're wonderful, but they argued a lot. And she didn't want that in her relationship. And I grew up with parents. I never saw my parents argue once. And so in my mind, a good relationship meant that there was no arguing. And in Jennifer's mind, for exactly the opposite reason, a good relationship meant you never argued. So we
Right.
never argued.
Right.
And it was great and peaceful until it wasn't. And then I
Yeah.
had to realize that I'd never expressed anger or even told her what irritated me ever.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was a big deal, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. I think I started working with you because I remember I was sitting down with your wife and she was talking about that very thing of the emotional root. And she had asked me, "Do you know what the emotional root of your disease is?" And I was just like, "No, I have no idea." She's like, "Oh, I think it has to do with XYZ." And I was like, well, it hit me down to the
Mm.
core. I was like, oh man, it totally. So it sparked my interest. She was like, you should totally work with Craig because he does this kind of stuff, asking the questions. What I think is really interesting is that it can be actually quite reliable of
Hmm.
okay, so if you have endometriosis, there's potentially some wounds, parental wounds that you really need to dive into. And
Hmm.
or I've heard, and this is one thing that you don't hear in Christian circles as much, but I've heard in more like the hippie, like natural healing thing is like if you're angry, that resides in your liver. If you have grief, it
Oh yeah.
resides in your lungs, like
Yeah.
those types of things. And what I feel like I'm uncovering is that this is there is a universal truth to this, that whenever
Mhm.
we hold emotions in our bodies, and specific emotions, they actually go to certain organs, and it can be evident across the line for people who have that type of disease. So that's been
Yeah.
a really fascinating tool that I've enjoyed digging into, because there are some resources where you can actually look these things up, and it's been a phenomenal part of my healing journey.
Yeah. The example that I always give people, because it's relatively logical to understand, is that of breast cancer.
Mm,
And breast cancer is a disruption in the nest.
mm,
So kind of joke, right? When people are getting ready to have a baby, or when moms are getting ready to have a baby, they go through like a nesting process where they get everything organized in the house. Um, so breast cancer is a disruption in the nest. If it's on the right, it generally speaking has to do with, if you're right-handed, it has to do with the male aspect or male relationships. If it's on the left, it has to do with mother aspects or female relationships. So, for example, if a woman is up in years and her husband is also up in years, and she's caring for him as his health is declining, and then he dies, the conclusion obviously is not what we would have wanted, but now the conflict is over. And so all of that, um, ultimately, it's maternal output, right, towards her husband in taking care of him, goes into the right breast, and she develops cancer in the right breast. Oftentimes, for women too, if the disruption has more to do with motherhood, like a series of miscarriages or something along those lines, then that's the disruption in the nest, which has to do with motherhood. And so it develops on the left hand side.
very
And
interesting.
I mean, the other piece that's really amazing, and this is why I say that I don't think cancer should be thought of as a battle. Like fighting cancer is what we say, but I don't think it should be thought of as a battle. And that is that a woman with breast cancer who's also lactating, the milk from that breast is 3 times as nutritious as the milk from a non-cancerous breast. So the breast with cancer in the ducts is producing more nutritious milk. And the reason I like telling people that is because cancer at its core is not something trying to kill you; it's something trying to help you survive. And I mean, if you think about cancer that way, it completely changes the way that you do battle or fight it, or
Yeah.
whatever word we should use to talk about trying to heal. Yeah.
One of the things that's really resonated with me as we've worked together is I feel like I'm kind of coming to this conclusion that all of the ailments and things that happen, it is our body trying to get our attention. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
something is off. Like, it is for us. And our whatever disease, for me, endometriosis, there is just been a lot of stuff that I have not been addressing emotionally for a lot of years. And my
Mm-hmm.
body said, stop. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
got to the point where the only thing I could give attention to is trying to get my life back from this disease. And when I started working with you, and that shift kind of began to happen with my mind, is, oh, my body is working for me. It's trying to get my attention. Not what have I not accessed? What have I suppressed that I need to give love, care, and attention to?
Mm-hmm.
And there's just been a lot of things in my life where I just take it all in, and I take it all in with a smile, instead of like what you were saying of expressing your emotions and letting those things out. And for me, I grew up Christian as well. With my faith tradition, I think I had a lot of confusion around what is healthy, because you want to be loving and kind. It was all under this guise of being a good person. And I didn't realize that I was actually sacrificing myself that, in the wake of all of that. And so the journey I feel like I'm still on is, what is the balance of how do you access those emotions? How do you express them in a healthy way? And what does that look like when you're interacting in the world? Like, when is it okay to like be kind of hard about things and to like speak
Yeah.
your truth in a way that might make other people uncomfortable, or even, I don't want to say even hurt their feelings, but yeah, maybe it'll even hurt their feelings, because if you have someone who has been emotionally abusive to you, to tell them no, stop, will hurt their feelings. But
Right.
I have to go there and I have to do that in order to protect myself. Can you unpack that a little bit? I think that whole thing
Yeah.
is really interesting.
Yeah. Um, to kind of use sort of a kind of a different spin on the same idea. My grandfather passed away, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. And one of the things that people kept saying is he's in a better place. You know, we've heard that before, right? He's
Oh
in a
yeah.
better place. You don't need to worry about it. He's not suffering anymore, and all these kinds of things. And my response to them became after, because I actually dealt with that when my mom died too, when I was 17. So I've had a lot of years to reflect on those kind of comments. and um, and I said, yeah, you're right. He is in a better place, but he's also dead.
Mm. Yeah.
and and people were really shocked by that response. And I guess I'm saying it sort of partially on purpose to sort of illustrate the point. What I was saying to those people in reality was he's gone now, and that makes
Yeah.
me sad, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And so my point is that when we hurt, sometimes it makes other people uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and our suffering doesn't. We don't need to hide our suffering
Mhm.
so that other people don't suffer.
Yeah.
And I think that and there's lots of different versions of that too. There's um, I was in a session once with kind of a learning session once with a woman who had kind of an Eastern spiritual background. I don't know what name she would exactly call it, but she was describing a meditative experience where this was a person struggling with cancer. And she was describing this meditative experience where she was kind of outside her body. And the teacher said, stop, stop, stop. Your body is sick. Come back down into your body. And so that's kind of a different version of the same thing. Like we over spiritualize and avoid suffering in a way, either for ourselves or for other people, and
Yeah.
both of those are equally a problem.
Yeah.
um, so when we suffer, when we're on a healing journey, um, I mean, this is kind of the hard part personally. Sometimes you lose a lot of friends,
Mhm.
because they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to interact with you when
Mhm.
you're hurting, especially if you're hurting and honest about it.
Yeah.
And so, I lost a lot of friends when I was
Yeah.
sick,
Mhm.
and um, that sucked. But the reality is that the ones that were willing to enter into that suffering with me in a meaningful way, those are the ones I wanted there. The ones
Yeah.
that disappeared for a while, they had their own stuff going on,
Yeah.
and so anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
Grief is an interesting thing, because I think people who are, in my experience, who have dealt with their own grief and their own pain aren't afraid of your grief and pain. And in our fertility journey, I have found that been very surprised by the people who are okay with recognizing that, hey, what you've gone through is really hard. And they're not afraid of that space, and they still
right,
treat you as their friend and bring you into their life and um, check on you in those ways. But a lot of times, what I feel like I've seen with grief, and maybe it's a very I think more Western way of going about it, is like, okay, you grieve, you get a few weeks or a few months or whatever, and then and then once you're over it, everything is good and everything's back to normal.
yeah,
And I've had that where I think you have to be careful who you even open up your grief to, because sometimes it's not received. And I've had
yeah,
that happen a few times where I'm like, this sucks. Like we're coming on 9 years of our fertility journey, and there's just things that I won't get back because of that. I won't be able to raise my children alongside some of my friends' children, and I wanted that, and it's gone.
right,
And to say that out loud oftentimes when I'm honest and open about like it sucks and I'm not happy about it, the response I will get from some people is it's okay though. It'll be better. Everything's going to be, it's just like all
Hmm.
like oftentimes I will get a response, and I know it's because people don't want to see me go through something hard and painful. They want it to be okay. And oh, I heard this story of somebody, it took them 10 years and then they had twins. Like there's always some like psycho happy
Right,
story on the other side of it. And I'm like, oh man, I would love that. I would love that. I would love a story like that. But we don't know that that's going to be the outcome. And it's
right,
hard when it feels a little bit delusional rather than just like, and I think what I've
totally.
struggled with is like where do you speak out life, where do you speak life, and you're just like, I'm only going to say my prolonged fertility journey versus infertility, like there's like that balance of just like being real but also not like staying in the depths of despair at all times. And I
Totally.
think that's a line you have to walk when going through hard things and grief.
Yeah.
um yeah. So,
Yeah. I think you hit on two things there that are really cool. One is the way that we talk about stuff. And that's why, like you said, what the example you gave is great, saying infertility versus prolonged fertility.
mhm.
Um, so I mean the fancy word is neuro-linguistic programming,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So that is what we say is programmed into our mind. If we say infertility, it's programmed into our mind that we're infertile. If we say prolonged fertility, it just means that my fertility is prolonged.
Mhm,
So there is a difference and it does make a difference,
mhm.
the way that we talk about things. When I talk to people about losing weight, I always tell them, you don't want to lose weight. There's no point in losing weight because you don't want to find it again. You want to eliminate it,
I love that.
right? So,
Yeah,
um, so the way that we talk about things does matter.
that's
Um,
really good.
however, I think that if you talk about things in a way that's both honest and with words that are meaningful and purposeful,
Mm,
and then you also express your emotions at the same time, that's when health comes.
mm.
Because
That's really
when
good.
if we're trying to say all the right things
Yeah,
but then we're also denying our emotions, that's
yeah,
delusion, right?
yeah.
When we're trying to say the right things and we're also being honest,
Hmm.
that is, I think that's what health is. That's what health looks like.
That's really
Then,
good.
you know you talked about grief too. I think our culture, we don't express emotions very well at all.
Mhm.
I mean, flat is actually what we want to find, right?
Yeah.
When you do business with people, flat, like, right? You don't want like an overabundance of emotion,
Hmm.
right?
Totally.
um I think about like expressions of grief like what you find in the Bible, where people put on sackcloth and ashes, like they go sit in the street in uncomfortable clothes on purpose and then throw ashes on their head and wail. I
Wow.
mean, that kind of behavior, you get thrown in the hospital for that kind of
Yeah.
stuff nowadays, right? Like that's not so. Our expressions of emotion are usually pretty flat and unsatisfying, and
That's
so
really good.
um, being encouraged to express emotions or even just cry,
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And then you combine that with purposefully chosen words, and that's where healing starts
That's
or
really good.
continues or whatever.
How do you show up for people who are in grief? I think that's one thing, as I think I've gone through this, it's made me more aware of like how I show up, like what things
Sure.
make me uncomfortable. Do you have any tools or thoughts on showing up for people who are in a place of grief?
Yeah, actually, this is a really good one for almost any situation where you're not sure what to do, and you're with another person, and that is mirror, empathize, and validate.
Mm.
So if somebody is in grief and they express grief to you, mirror the grief, be with them in it, right? Say back to them what they just expressed to you, like, oh my gosh, I hear that you've lost some, whatever it is that they're expressing, and then empathize, right? I I that makes me so sad, right? I empathize with the fact that you're feeling big emotions, and then validate, right? your situation is hard.
Yeah.
The fact that you feel that way about it makes perfect sense.
Totally.
And then all of a sudden, now you're actually with them. You might even feel the thing that they're feeling, and that's okay. We don't need to run from emotions and like try and get away from stuff like that. And showing up for people is way simpler than we make it.
Yeah.
Just sitting with them, mirror, empathize, and validate, and just be there with them.
It's really
It
good.
doesn't need to be complicated,
It's really
so
good. I
yeah.
love that. That's the grieve with those who grieve and
Yep.
rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And
Totally.
I think that's really beautifully said. I love that. Okay, one thing that I wanted us to touch on in
Yeah.
something that you've talked about is the epileptic emotional crisis people who are healing their bodies go through. I would love it if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So it's epileptoid crisis.
Okay.
It has to do with, and for those of you who want to like research more, this is something that is part of German New Medicine, which is a way of thinking through some of this stuff. And there's the disease process goes like this. There is a conflict. Whatever that conflict is, that's the first phase of a disease process. That's an emotional disturbance of some sort, whatever that emotional disturbance is. This is one that is big enough to where the brain says, we got to stop dealing with this. It's too big. I'm too distracted. I have to download this into the body. Mm. And so then the emotional conflict becomes something biological. And so it's downloaded into the body. And usually that takes place in a lot of cases at the conclusion. So like, for example, if you play a soccer game, I played soccer, you go through the soccer game, you're not sore during the game. That's the conflict. You're sore after the game ends. So the game stops, you stop, and all that lactic acid in your muscles that helped you deal with the conflict has now broken your muscles down and it needs to heal. And so the healing process is what we would call disease. And so now the brain has downloaded that into the body and the disease process begins. At a certain point, the conflict is over and the disease process has begun its healing and the brain can switch off the disease process. That's the epileptoid crisis, is when the brain actually turns off the disease process because whatever the lesson is there, right? So a conflict leads to a resolution of the conflict, leads to a lesson, leads to the epileptoid crisis, which is where the disease process is turned off in the brain. And then usually that's accompanied by either a resurgence of symptoms or of the diseases you're dealing with, or just a like the height of the actual disease, and then the body goes into healing, and that's where healing comes from. And then the body can go back to the way it was designed to function in the beginning. So I don't know. Do you have any like that? That was a lot of words.
Oh, I love that. Can you give an
Okay.
example of that? I think
Sure.
you gave an example one time of a breast cancer situation where,
Yes.
if I remember correctly, like you get your initial disease for whatever reason, and then you kind of heal from it, and then you have this moment of resurgence. In my mind,
Yes.
that is that kind of climatic moment of like the what did you say?
The
That
epileptoid crisis, and that's exactly it. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I know 3 different cases of people who struggled with breast cancer, and it looked pretty good. And actually, my cancer journey follows the same exact flow. It looked pretty good for a while, and then all of a sudden, it comes back with a vengeance. Mm-hmm. And for those people that I'm thinking of in my head with breast cancer, it goes from their breast to everywhere else in their body also, and then they begin to heal. And all 3 of the people that I'm thinking of are now without cancer. And that's the same thing for me. I felt like I was done, right? And maybe that even contributed to part of my, like, the resurgence of my symptoms. But that crisis, honestly, that was the culmination of, and the thing that moved my trajectory in a very different way. So even from an emotional perspective, facing death in that way, or that climax of symptoms, which was so scary.
Yeah.
That was really the thing that turned the tables for me. So that's the epileptoid crisis. It's kind of a resurgent. Usually, it's accompanied by a resurgence of symptoms, but what it actually is the brain switching off the disease process so that the body can heal. So the disease process starts often at the conclusion of the conflict, whatever that is, and the epileptoid crisis is when the brain turns it off.
Very interesting. That's really interesting. So it's kind of like, is it your body's kind of last attempt to get your attention to finish dealing with emotionally things that are going on? Am I understanding that
Yeah,
correctly?
the way that I think about it emotionally is like, you can use relationships as an example. If you've made bad decisions in a relationship, the moment it starts getting better is actually the hardest one. Right? Because now, okay, I accept that all of this crap has happened. Now I have to do something different or it's not going to get better.
Right.
That's the epileptoid crisis in the relationship, right?
Oh, really good.
So that's both the best moment and the worst moment.
Yeah, totally.
It's the moment when things change, and it's also this realization of how horrible it actually is. And so our body can mimic, our body mimics that in the way that we experience disease process.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I think that's a really good example, because you see that in a lot of relationships where you're like maybe putting along and then all of a sudden something gets their attention, something that has gone completely south. And it's like, okay, we need to address this. And then either healing or break comes after that.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that's the case within any disease, or even for cancer, for example. It's like that crisis happens and there's some kind of resolution that takes place, whether it's healing and restoration, or death. There is a resolution that takes place after that resurgence. That's an interesting pattern. Very interesting pattern.
And in some cases, the epileptoid crisis is also when death happens, right? So a resurgence of symptoms for someone who's pretty sick means that might be the end for them.
Yeah.
But
so interesting.
I had someone say once that we work and we work and we work, and then we figure it out, and then we transition.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's when our time comes, when we finish the work.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some truth to that. And so for some people, finishing the work means that this is the end for me. And
for those who are listening who are kind of getting that revelation, maybe in a deeper place of, okay, I have emotions and things, and I don't even know how to access them. I think that was the case for me when I even began being aware. I didn't think I had any emotional issues. I think I was similar to you. I'm like, I'm good. I'm happy. Like life's dealt me some hard cards, but I'm like a champion. How do you tap into those things? And how do you begin to, are there some tools that you can share with the listeners of how to tap into emotions and begin to resolve those?
Sure. The first one is usually letting go of what you think you're obligated to do. And I think that, especially for people who have grown up in religious backgrounds, that has a really concrete meaning. And that is that, in most like Christian settings, that is, I'm suffering, but God is good, so I'm okay. And letting go of that and saying, I'm suffering, and that's it. Right? That's the first step, right? Right? God is good, but I'm suffering. Like my experience is that I'm suffering. And, honestly, the people in the Bible, they did not have a problem saying that. They talked to God in ways that we would never dare.
Yeah.
If you read the Psalms, some of the things that these guys say to God is shocking. Like, I wouldn't even feel comfortable praying things like that, but they spoke their anger straight up. Like they're like, what are you doing, God?
You left
like, why
me,
are
you
you doing this
forsook
to me?
Yeah.
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 Answer me. My favorite one, honestly, my favorite one is in Psalm 13. Answer me, or I will sleep the sleep of death, and my adversary will rejoice when I am shaken. He's like, answer my questions, God, or I give up. Right?
Yeah,
Like that's the so
totally.
I think that so for whatever context people are listening from, your expected emotional obligations are the first thing you have to let go of if you're going to know what you really feel.
That's
So
really
if you're
good.
expected to be fine, um, then letting go of whatever that means for you, and then choosing to understand what's really happening. That's the first step, is letting
Mhm.
go of what you're obligated to do. In
That's
fact,
really good.
in fact, I feel like my role in the work that I do is really just to help people understand what they're compelled to do, and then decide if that's what they actually want to do.
Yeah,
Like what do we feel compelled to engage in, and is that actually the right thing, or is that just what you're compelled to do?
totally.
um
Wow.
so
That's really,
yeah.
really good. So good. Is there
Yeah,
any last things that you want to leave for our listeners or any last thoughts that you have before we close?
yeah, just that life is full of hope, and disease actually is full of um is trying to help you.
Mm,
And
that's
that
really good.
for people who are suffering those, sometimes that can actually sound harsh,
Mhm.
because the suffering is real.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you're not suffering. What I'm saying is that your suffering has a genuine message that means something.
Mm,
And as you engage in trying to listen to that, the lessons will change the rest of your life. And I think that changes the way we experience our suffering. It changes it from something which is visited upon us to something which we actively participate in, and that
really
makes
good.
a massive difference.
Yeah. It makes it empowering and not just I'm a victim
Right.
from this. Makes you an active participant in your healing, which I think is really powerful.
Totally.
So
Totally.
good. Craig, if people want to work with you, what's a good way that they can get in contact with you?
Yeah. My website is heritagehealing.org, and you can check me out there. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Craig. It was so great having you on. And thanks so much for those who are listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more healing stories and expert interviews, please be sure to follow and subscribe to our channel. All right. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.